The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was the largest structure ever built by any species. It floated at the center of known space, a station so massive that it had its own gravity. Inside, representatives from 300 different alien races gathered to discuss matters of trade, territory, and war. The ceiling rose so high that clouds formed near the top, and the speaking platform at the center looked like a small island in an ocean of watching eyes. Today, the had come to make a claim. Ambassador Al stood at the platform, his body gleaming under the lights. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with 4 arms and a head that looked like a nightmare made of sharp angles and compound eyes. Behind him, a holographic display showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the void. "We present to the conquered our formal notice of annexation," Al said, his voice clicking and buzzing through the translator. "The world designated Sol 3, locally known as Earth." A murmur went through the assembly. Earth was new to the galactic community. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 5 years ago, and they had barely begun to explore beyond their own solar system. Most species in the conquered had never even met a human. "Our scouts have observed this species for 60 of their years," Al continued. "They are primitive, violent. They fight among themselves constantly over resources, ideology, and borders that exist only in their imagination. They have poisoned their own atmosphere and oceans. They have developed nuclear weapons and have come close to destroying themselves on multiple occasions." The holographic display changed, showing images of human wars, soldiers fighting in trenches, cities burning, mushroom clouds rising over test sites. The aliens in the assembly watched with a mixture of horror and disgust. "Most importantly," Al said, "they possess no meaningful defense. They have no fleet, no orbital weapons, no planetary shields. They have sent exactly 1 ship beyond their solar system." He paused, letting his compound eyes sweep across the assembly. "1 ship, a converted exploration vessel with minimal armament. It is currently docked at this very station." Laughter rippled through the crowd. They were known throughout the galaxy as conquerors. They had taken 47 worlds in their history, and they had never lost a war. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. The idea of a single human ship standing against them was absurd. "Under conquered law," Al said, "any world that cannot defend itself may be claimed by a superior power. We invoke this right. The Dominion formally claims Earth and all human territory." The assembly began to murmur approval. It was unfortunate for the humans, of course, but this was how the galaxy worked. The strong took from the weak. It had always been this way. Then a voice cut through the noise. "I object." Every eye in the chamber turned to find the speaker. She was small by galactic standards, barely 2 meters tall, with brown skin and black hair pulled back in a tight knot. She wore a simple gray uniform with a patch on her shoulder showing a blue and green planet. Her name was Commander, and she was the sole human representative to the Galactic Concord. Al made a sound that might have been amusement. "The human objects, how delightful, on what grounds?" Walked toward the speaking platform. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every alien in the assembly watched her with curiosity, pity, or contempt. She was a dead woman walking, they thought. Her entire species was already dead. They just did not know it yet. "On the grounds that Earth is not defenseless," said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "And on the grounds that any attempt to take our world will be met with force." The laughter this time was louder. Even species that were not allied with found the statement funny. 1 ship. The humans had 1 ship, and this woman was threatening the greatest military power in the quadrant. Al leaned down toward, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Commander, I have seen your vessel, the Defiance you call it. A charming name. It has, 12 weapon systems, shields rated for asteroid deflection, a crew of 200. 247, said. "My personal transport has more firepower," Al said. "My flagship carries a crew of 15,000. I have 600 ships in my personal fleet alone, and the Dominion has thousands more. What exactly do you think you can do against us?" Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but something about it made several nearby aliens uncomfortable. Humans, they had heard, showed their teeth when they were happy. They also showed their teeth when they were about to attack. "I think," said slowly, "that you have made a very serious mistake." Al straightened, his amusement fatting slightly. "And what mistake is that?" "You have been watching us for 60 years, said. "You have seen our wars, our weapons, our violence, and you have concluded that we are weak." She shook her head. You saw us fighting each other with one hand tied behind our backs, following rules of engagement, limiting ourselves out of fear of what we might become. You saw us at peace, Ambassador. You have never seen what humans do when survival is at stake. Pretty words, Al said, but words do not stop plasma cannons. No, agreed, they do not. She turned to address the full assembly, raising her voice so that every translator in the chamber could pick up her words. The Galactic Conquered has rules about annexation. A defending species must be given time to prepare. 60 standard days. I am invoking that right now formally before this assembly. Al waved a dismissive hand. Granted, take your 60 days, build your defenses, it will make no difference. When the time expires, we will come and your world will fall. Nodded once as if this was exactly what she expected. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber without looking back. The aliens watched her go, already dismissing her as a footnote in history. The brave human who stood against the inevitable. They would probably write songs about her after her species was enslaved. Outside the chamber, pulled a communication device from her pocket. Her hands were steady as she typed a message in a code that no alien had ever broken. The message was short, just 3 words, but it would change the course of human history. She pressed send. On Earth, in bunkers buried beneath mountains and military bases hidden in remote deserts, screens flickered to life. Officers who had waited years for this moment read the message and began to move. Generals made phone calls. Engineers powered up systems that had been dormant for decades. Crews reported to ships that officially did not exist. The message spread like fire through dry grass, reaching every prepared human in the solar system. Wake the sleepers, it's time. Thought they were coming to conquer a defenseless world. They had no idea that they had just walked into a trap that humanity had been building since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that appeared on no map and existed in no official record, General Sarah stared at a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different location. Shipyards hidden inside asteroids. Weapon platforms disguised as communication satellites. Training facilities built into the bones of the moon. The message had arrived 6 hours ago. Wake the sleepers. After 5 years of waiting, the moment had finally come. Status report said. A young officer beside her pulled up a list. All 12 sleeper vessels are responding, General. Crews are boarding now. Full combat readiness in 48 hours. 12 ships, it sounded like nothing. They had thousands, but knew something that the aliens did not. Those 12 ships were not ordinary vessels. They were the product of human fear, human ingenuity, and human paranoia. They were built by a species that had spent its entire history preparing for war. On the screens, she watched the ships come to life. The Beijing, the Moscow, the Lagos, the New Delhi, each one named for a city that had pledged its resources to the secret project. Each one carrying weapons that had never been tested in real combat because testing them would have revealed their existence. What about the Defiance? Asked. Captain has been briefed. Retrofit teams are working around the clock. The Conquered station thinks they are making repairs from an engine malfunction. They will never know the truth. Nodded, the Defiance was special. It had been designed to look weak, to appear as nothing more than an exploration ship with basic defensive systems. The aliens had scanned it dozens of times and found nothing threatening. That was because the truly dangerous parts were hidden behind false walls and fake cargo holds, waiting for the moment when humanity would need them. Across the solar system, Captain stood on the bridge of his ship and watched his crew work. They moved with quiet efficiency, removing panels from walls and revealing equipment that had been installed in secret before the ship ever left Earth. Plasma conduits that could power weapons 3 times the size of anything the aliens expected. Targeting systems borrowed from humanity's deadliest military programs. Armor plating that could be deployed in seconds, transforming the innocent explorer into something far more dangerous. How long? Asked his chief engineer. 20 hours for the main systems, 40 for the secondary arrays. She will not look pretty, Captain, but she will fight. Nodded. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from decades of military service. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing that he might never come home. Every member of his crew had made the same choice. The aliens have been watching us, said quietly. They think they know what we are capable of. They have seen our wars, our weapons, our failures, but they made a mistake. What mistake, sir? smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They saw us fighting fair. They saw us following rules, limiting ourselves, holding back our worst impulses. They never considered what might happen if we stopped holding back. In the command ship, far from Earth's solar system, Fleet Commander reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity. He was old for his kind, nearly 200 years, and he had led the conquest of 17 worlds. He knew how to evaluate a threat. The humans, he decided, were not a threat. Yes, they were violent. Yes, they had developed nuclear weapons and nearly destroyed themselves. But that very fact proved their weakness. A strong species would never have come so close to self-destruction. A strong species would have unified long ago, would have directed its energy outward instead of wasting it on internal conflicts. The evaluation force departs tomorrow, told his officers. 200 ships, more than enough to assess their defenses and prepare for the main fleet. Is that not excessive, Commander? One officer asked. The humans have only one ship. Made a gesture of dismissal. Better to be cautious. These creatures are unpredictable. They may have hidden something from our scouts. It will not matter in the end, but I prefer to avoid unnecessary losses. The officer accepted this logic. They were careful conquerors. They did not rush. They did not underestimate. They gathered information, planned their attacks, and then crushed their enemies with overwhelming force. But even with all his experience, could not imagine what was waiting for them. Back on Earth, the public was told nothing about the coming war. The governments announced a series of emergency military exercises, nothing to worry about, just routine preparations. People went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. But some people knew. In every country, there were families who had received quiet visits from military officials years ago. Families who had said goodbye to sons and daughters and husbands and wives, who had watched them leave for assignments that could never be discussed. Those families looked up at the sky now and wondered if they would ever see their loved ones again. In a small apartment in Ayers, Maria sat by her window and watched the stars appear. Her son had left 5 years ago, telling her only that he had been selected for something important, something that might save everyone. She had not heard from him since. Now she held a photograph of him in her hands, taken when he was young, before the military, before the secrets. She did not pray because she had never been religious, but she hoped. She hoped that whatever was coming, her son would survive it. High above Earth, in a shipyard hidden inside a hollowed asteroid, the last of the sleeper crews boarded their vessels. These men and women had trained for years in secret facilities, preparing for a war that might never come. Now it had come, and they were ready. Commander Lisa took her seat on the bridge of the Lagos. She was 34 years old, born in Nigeria, educated in Britain, and trained in facilities that officially did not exist. Her ship was smaller than the Defiance, designed for speed and precision strikes rather than prolonged combat. "All stations report ready," her first officer said. Nodded, through the viewport she could see other ships powering up, their engines glowing blue in the darkness. 12 vessels against an empire. The odds were absurd. The mission was probably suicide. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is Commander. In a few days we will face an enemy that has never been defeated. They have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and technology that has crushed dozens of civilizations. They believe we are weak. They believe we are doomed." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They are wrong. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We have walked on our moon and sent machines to the edge of our solar system. We have done what no other species in this galaxy has ever done. We have taken ourselves from caves to starships in the blink of a cosmic eye." Around the fleet, crew members listened in silence. They think they know us. They have watched our planet for decades, studying our weaknesses, cataloging our failures, but they have missed something crucial. They have seen what we do to ourselves. They have never seen what we do to our enemies. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. "In 3 days, we will show them." The fleet powered up, weapons charging, shields activating, crews taking their battle stations. Across human space, a species that had spent its history fighting itself finally had a common enemy. And for the first time in their long history of conquest, they were about to learn what that meant. The evaluation force arrived at the edge of human space exactly on schedule. 200 warships, each one bristling with weapons, dropped out of faster-than-light travel and arranged themselves in perfect formation. Commander Axe, leader of the force, surveyed the darkness ahead and saw nothing but rocks and ice. "Scan the system," he ordered. "Find their defenses." His sensors officer worked the controls for several minutes, then looked up with confusion in his compound eyes. "Commander, I am detecting only one vessel, the human ship Defiance. It is positioned near the outer asteroid field." "Only one ship," Axe clicked his mandibles in amusement. "They sent their only ship to face us. These creatures are either very brave or very stupid." "Perhaps both, Commander." Axe gestured for the fleet to advance. 200 ships moved forward like a swarm of predatory insects, weapons charging, shields raised. The single human vessel grew larger on their screens, a tiny gray shape against the black void. "Open a communication channel," Axe ordered. "Let us give them a chance to surrender. The Dominion prefers living slaves to dead enemies." The channel opened with a crackle of static. On the screen, a human male appeared. He was older than Axe expected, with gray in his hair and lines on his face. He wore a simple uniform and sat in a chair that seemed too small for someone who was about to die. "Human vessel," Axe said. "I am Commander Axe of the Dominion. You are outnumbered and surrender now and your crew will be spared. Resist and you will be destroyed." The human said nothing for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "My name is Captain of the United Nations ship Defiance, and I have a response to your offer." The communication channel suddenly filled with a strange sound. It took Axe several seconds to identify it. The human was laughing. Not nervous laughter, not fearful laughter, but genuine amusement, as if Axe had told him a joke. "What is so funny, human?" Stopped laughing, but the smile remained. "You are, Commander. You came all this way with 200 ships to fight one vessel. You thought this would be easy. You thought we would surrender or run or beg for mercy. Will you not?" No, leaned forward, and something in his eyes made Axe suddenly uncomfortable. "We have been waiting for you. We have been waiting for this moment since the day we first learned you existed. And now that you are here, I want you to understand something very clearly." "And what is that?" "You are not going home." The communication cut off. For a moment, Axe stared at the blank screen, uncertain what to make of the human's words. Then his sensors officer screamed. "Commander, the human ship is launching weapons. Dozens of them, no, hundreds." The Defiance had opened hidden ports along her hull and released a cloud of objects into space. They looked small on the sensors, barely worth noticing, but they were accelerating toward the fleet at impossible speeds. "What are those?" Axe demanded. "Unknown, Commander. They appear to be simple metal projectiles. No explosives, no guidance systems, just tungsten rods." Axe almost laughed. Metal rods? The humans were throwing metal rods at them. His ships had shields that could deflect plasma bursts and energy weapons. Simple kinetic projectiles could never. The first rod hit a cruiser at 3% of the speed of light. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. The kinetic energy released by the impact was greater than anything the shields were designed to handle. One moment there was a warship. The next moment there was an expanding cloud of superheated metal and organic matter. More rods followed. Dozens of them, then hundreds, spreading through the fleet like rain. Ships tried to dodge, but the projectiles were too fast. They tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. In the first 60 seconds of battle, they lost 23 ships without firing a single shot. "Return fire," Axe screamed. "Destroy that vessel." The remaining ships opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, energy beams, guided missiles, all focused on the single human ship. The Defiance should have been vaporized in seconds. Instead, it moved. Had studied tactics for years. He knew exactly how they would attack, where they would aim, what formations they would use. The Defiance danced between their shots like a leaf in the wind, spinning and rolling and changing direction so fast that the alien targeting systems could not keep up. "Impossible," Axe whispered. "No ship can maneuver like that." But the human ship was doing it, and while it danced, it kept firing. The battle spread across millions of kilometers. The Defiance retreated into the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover, appearing from unexpected angles to launch more attacks before vanishing again. They pursued, but the field was dangerous, full of tumbling rocks and hidden debris. They lost 3 more ships to collisions. used every trick humanity had ever invented for killing things. He launched drones that mimicked the Defiance's heat signature, drawing fire away from the real ship. He dropped mines that drifted silently until vessels flew too close. He broadcast false communications to confuse their coordination. And then there was the virus. No one knew how the humans had done it, but somehow they had uploaded a program into the fleet's communication network. Ships began receiving contradictory orders. Targeting systems identified friendly vessels as enemies. Navigation computers plotted courses into asteroids. In the chaos, the Defiance struck again and again. "This cannot be happening," Axe said, watching his fleet fall apart around him. "We outnumber them 200 to 1. Commander, we have lost 41 ships. The human vessel is damaged but still operational." How is this possible?" No one had an answer. They had conquered 47 worlds. They had faced enemies with larger fleets, better technology, superior numbers. They had never faced anything like this. The humans did not fight the way civilized species fought. They did not engage in honorable combat or follow established rules of warfare. They fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick, every underhanded tactic, every conceivable advantage. 6 hours into the battle, Axe finally gave the order to retreat. The surviving ships fled toward the edge of the system, leaving 63 destroyed vessels behind. The Defiance pursued them partway, launching a few final shots, but eventually fell back. She was hurt, leaking atmosphere from a dozen breaches, her engines barely functional. But she was alive. On the bridge, sat in his command chair and watched the enemy run. His crew was exhausted, wounded, some of them dead. His ship was a wreck, but they had done something no one in the galaxy thought possible. They had won. "Captain," his communications officer said weakly, "we are receiving a transmission from the flagship. It is not encrypted." "Put it through." Axe's face appeared on the screen. He looked different now, smaller somehow, his compound eyes filled with something that might have been fear. "What are you?" he asked. "What kind of creatures are you?" Considered the question for a moment, then he replied, "We are human, and you made a terrible mistake coming here." The transmission ended. They disappeared into faster-than-light travel, running back to their empire to report what they had seen. Knew this was not the end. The main fleet would come soon, and it would be far larger than this evaluation force. The Defiance could not survive another battle like this one. But she did not have to fight alone anymore. The sleepers were awake, and they were coming. The main fleet arrived 14 days later. 2,000 warships arranged in perfect battle formation, stretching across space like a wall of death. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at them with cold fury in his compound eyes. He had heard the reports from Axe. He had seen the recordings of the battle. 63 ships lost to a single enemy vessel. It was humiliating, it was unacceptable, and it would not happen again. "Deploy all forces," ordered. "Saturate the system. I want no rock unturned, no shadow unsearched. Find them and destroy them." The fleet spread out, moving toward Earth like a slowly closing fist. Sensors swept every corner of the solar system, cataloging every object, every ship, every potential threat. "Commander," an officer reported, "we are detecting the human vessel Defiance near the 4th planet. It appears heavily damaged." "Of course it is damaged. What else?" The officer hesitated. "Commander, we are detecting additional vessels, 12 of them. They appear to be military ships." Turned sharply. 12. Our intelligence said the humans had only one ship." "They were hidden, Commander, disguised as mining equipment, cargo transports, even debris. They have been here the whole time." For a long moment said nothing. 12 ships. The humans had hidden 12 additional ships from surveillance. It should have been impossible. The Dominion's scouts were the best in the galaxy. But it did not matter. 12 ships against 2,000 was still absurd odds. The humans were brave, but bravery could not change mathematics. "Destroy them," said, "all of them." The fleet advanced. In Earth orbit, the human ships gathered together for the first time. The Defiance, battered but still flying, took position at the center of the formation. Around her, the 12 sleeper vessels spread out in a defensive pattern. Compared to the approaching enemy, they looked like insects facing a storm. On the Defiance bridge, Captain studied the tactical display. 2,000 ships, each one larger than his entire fleet combined. The numbers were impossible. All ships, said into the fleet communication channel. You know what we are facing, you know the odds. Some of us will not survive this day. But what we do here will determine the fate of our species, our homes, our families, everything we have ever loved. He paused, letting his words sink in. They believe they are coming to conquer a helpless world. They believe we are primitive savages, creatures too stupid to know when to surrender. Let us show them what human savages can do. The enemy fleet opened fire. The space between the two forces lit up with weapons fire, thousands of energy beams and plasma bursts crossing the void. The human ships scattered, moving in patterns they had practiced for years, dodging what they could and absorbing what they could not. The Beijing was the first to fall. Commander knew his ship was dying. The engines were gone, the shields were failing, and fires burned through half his compartments. He had two choices: abandon ship or make his death mean something. He chose the second option. All hands, this is the captain. Evacuate immediately. That is an order. His crew fled to escape pods while remained on the bridge, steering his crippled ship toward the largest carrier he could find. The enemy tried to destroy him, but he was already too close. The Beijing's reactor went critical just as she struck the carrier's hull. The explosion consumed both ships and everything nearby. When the light faded, 97 vessels had been destroyed or disabled, and 42 crew members who had not escaped in time were gone. The battle continued. They fought until she was literally torn in half by concentrated fire. Her surviving crew members continued to fire from the wreckage, using handheld weapons and emergency systems to take down 2 more enemy ships before they were silenced. The Lagos lasted longer, her speed allowing her to dance through the enemy formation, striking weak points and causing chaos. Commander pushed her ship beyond every limit, executing maneuvers that should have been impossible, until finally, a lucky shot took out her engines. She used her last minutes to ram a command ship, crippling enemy coordination in that sector. One by one, the human ships fell. But they did not fall quietly. Every ship took dozens of enemies with it. Every crew fought until they had nothing left to fight with. They had never seen anything like it. These humans did not surrender. They did not run. They did not beg for mercy. They just kept fighting, kept dying, kept killing until there was nothing left. 8 hours into the battle, only 3 human ships remained. The Defiance, barely functional, her hull held together by emergency repairs and desperate prayers. The Moscow, missing half her weapons and most of her crew, and the New Delhi, burning but still firing. Looked at the tactical display and saw 2,000 enemy contacts reduced to just over 1,500. The humans had destroyed or disabled nearly 500 ships. It was unprecedented. It was incredible. It was not enough. Captain, his weapons officer said quietly, "We have one option left." Knew what she meant. He had hoped it would not come to this. Plan Omega was not a weapon. It was an abomination, a technology so terrible that Earth's governments had sworn to never use it under any circumstances. But circumstances had changed. "Contact the Moscow and New Delhi," said. "Tell them to withdraw to minimum safe distance and open a channel to the flagship." His face appeared on the screen. The commander looked tired but triumphant. He knew he had won. "Human," said, "your fleet is destroyed. Your world is defenseless. Surrender now and I will grant your species a quick death instead of slow enslavement." Stared at the alien for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Let me tell you something about humanity, Commander. When we first discovered nuclear weapons, we did not use them for power or exploration. We used them to kill 200,000 people in 2 days. When we developed chemical weapons, we unleashed them on each other in trenches. When we learned to manipulate genetics, we immediately started designing viruses." He leaned forward. "Every technology we have ever created, we have first asked ourselves one question: how can this be used to kill? We have spent our entire existence perfecting the art of destruction. And now, Commander, you are going to see what happens when we stop holding back." Pressed a button on his console. From the Defiance's hull, a small container ejected into space. It looked insignificant, no larger than a human coffin. It drifted toward the flagship for several seconds before activating. The container opened, releasing a cloud of gray dust that spread through the vacuum faster than anything natural should have moved. The dust touched the flagship's shields and passed through them as if they did not exist. It touched the hull and began to eat. They called it the Gray Hunger. Humans called it self-replicating nanomachines. Whatever the name, the effect was the same. The microscopic machines consumed matter at the molecular level, using the raw material to create more of themselves. They had no purpose except to grow and spread and devour. The flagship began to dissolve, and as it dissolved, the nanomachines spread to nearby ships. "What have you done?" screamed through the communication channel. "What is this?" "This is humanity's last gift to you," said. "This is what we built when we realized we might not win. This is Plan Omega. If we cannot have our world, nobody will." The swarm spread through the fleet like fire through dry wood. Ships tried to flee, but the nanomachines were faster. They consumed metal and flesh and energy shields with equal hunger. Nearly 300 vessels were devoured before transmitted the kill code, causing the nanomachines to self-destruct. The remaining fled. 1,200 ships that had come to conquer Earth ran for their lives, abandoning their dead, leaving their invasion in ruins. The greatest military force in the quadrant had been broken by 13 human vessels and the willingness to use weapons that should never have existed. On the Defiance bridge, watched them go. His ship was dying around him. His crew was mostly dead. He was bleeding from a wound in his side that he did not remember receiving. But they had won. Humanity had won. The Galactic Conquered Assembly had never been so quiet. 300 species packed the Great Hall, their translators silent, their attention fixed on the speaker at the center platform. Commander stood where she had stood 60 days ago when they had declared humanity defenseless. She looked different now, older, harder. The uniform she wore was the same, but the woman inside it had changed. Behind her, a holographic display showed the aftermath of the battle, wreckage drifting through human space. The shattered remains of ships from both sides, the bodies of thousands floating frozen in the void. "The Dominion came to Earth with 2,000 ships," said. Her voice carried through the chamber, steady and cold. "They came to conquer a defenseless world. They came believing we were primitives, animals, creatures too weak to resist." She paused. 1,200 of their ships escaped. Nearly 800 did not. The greatest invasion fleet the Dominion has ever assembled was broken against a force of 13 vessels and the determination of a species that refused to die. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The numbers were impossible. No one defeated no one even came close. And yet the evidence was undeniable. The recordings had been by conquered observers. They themselves had confirmed the losses. "We paid a terrible price for this victory," continued. 10 of our 13 ships were destroyed. Over 3,000 human lives were lost. Among them was captain of the UNS Defiance, who gave his life to deploy the weapon that ended the battle. The display shifted to show the Defiance, drifting and dark, her hull torn open in a dozen places. Rescue teams had found still strapped into his command chair, his hands on the controls, his eyes open. He had died flying his ship. Captain's last words were recorded by the ship's computers. He said, "Tell them we were never defenseless. We were just waiting to see who would be stupid enough to find out." A sound went through the assembly, something between shock and nervous laughter. No one had ever spoken to the conquered this way. No species had ever dared. Stepped forward, her eyes sweeping across the gathered aliens. "For 60 years, they watched us. They saw our wars, our conflicts, our failures. They concluded that we were primitive and weak, but they made a critical error in their analysis. They saw what humans do to each other when we are fighting among ourselves, following rules, limiting our violence out of respect for our shared humanity." Her voice hardened. "They never considered what we would do to an enemy that threatened our existence. They never imagined what humanity looks like when we stop being civilized." The ambassador was present in the chamber, though he stood far from his usual position of honor. His species had suffered the greatest military defeat in their history. They had already sent word that they were formally withdrawing their claim to Earth. "Ambassador Al," said, turning to face him, 60 days ago you stood where I am standing and called humanity defenseless. You offered us the chance to surrender. You said that resistance was futile." Al said nothing. His compound eyes could not meet gaze. "I have a response from Earth's governments," said. "They wanted me to deliver it personally." She pulled a data chip from her pocket and held it up for the assembly to see. "This contains the specifications for the weapon that destroyed your fleet. The self-replicating nanomachines swarm that your survivors are calling the Gray Hunger. Earth's governments want the Dominion to know that we have more of these weapons. Many more, hidden in locations throughout our solar system. The chamber erupted in panicked conversation. Species that had barely noticed humanity before were now staring at the human representative with something like terror. "We did not want to use this weapon," said, her voice cutting through the noise. "It was built as a last resort, a doomsday option designed to ensure that any species that destroyed humanity would inherit only ashes. Captain activated it because he had no choice. But now that it has been revealed, we want the galaxy to understand something very clearly." She lowered the data chip and looked directly at the ambassador. "Earth is not interested in conquest. We do not want war. We do not seek to expand our territory or enslave other species. We want only to live in peace, to explore the stars, and to find our place in this galaxy." Her voice dropped to something almost gentle. "But if anyone threatens us again, we will respond without mercy. We will use every weapon at our disposal, no matter how terrible, no matter how destructive. We will turn our solar system into a graveyard rather than let it become a slave pen. This is not a threat. This is simply a statement of fact about who we are." She turned back to the assembly. "Humanity did not ask to join this galaxy. We did not seek attention or conflict. But we are here now, and we will never be prey. They learned this lesson the hard way. I sincerely hope no one else has to." The silence that followed was absolute. Weeks later, in a small apartment in Ayers, Maria received a visit from two military officers. They told her that her son was dead, killed in the battle that saved Earth. They gave her his personal effects: a few photographs, some letters, a worn book of poetry that he had carried since childhood. They also gave her a medal, the highest honor any human could receive, they said. Her son was a hero. His name would be remembered forever. Maria thanked them and closed the door. She sat in her chair by the window and held the medal in her hands, turning it over and over, feeling the weight of it. Her son was gone, but because of him, humanity would survive. She did not know if that was a fair trade. She did not know if anything could balance the scales of grief and gratitude. But she remembered something had told her once, years ago, when he first joined the military. "Someone has to stand between the darkness and the things worth protecting, Mom. Someone has to be willing to pay the price. If not me, then who?" Maria looked up at the stars, now visible through her window as night fell over the city. Somewhere out there, the Defiance was being towed back to Earth. The governments had decided to repair her, to place her in permanent orbit as a memorial to those who had died defending humanity. A reminder, they said, a warning to anyone who might come after. Maria did not care about warnings or memorials. She only knew that her son was gone, and that because of him, millions of children would grow up free instead of enslaved. That knowledge would have to be enough. In the Galactic Concord, species that had ignored humanity for years now watched the small blue planet with new eyes. Some watched with fear, wondering what other horrors the humans might have hidden. Some watched with respect, recognizing a species that had earned its place among the stars. A few watched with something like hope, thinking that perhaps humanity might be an ally against their own enemies. No one watched with contempt anymore. They retreated to their empire and began building new defenses. They had conquered 47 worlds in their history, but they would never forget the one that fought back. The gray hunger haunted their dreams, a reminder that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. And on Earth, life continued. Children went to school. Parents went to work. People argued about politics and sports and the small dramas of daily existence. Most of them never knew how close they had come to extinction. Most of them never knew about the 13 ships and 3,000 people who had died to save them. But some people knew, and they remembered. Every year on the anniversary of the battle, humans around the world looked up at the sky and saw the Defiance hanging in orbit, her hull gleaming in the sunlight. They remembered Captain and Commander and all the others who had given everything. They remembered that humanity had been called defenseless. And they remembered what happened to those who believed it.